This is the Palin Update on Mama Grizzly Radio. I'm Kevin Scholla.
We need to start now by electing strong leaders who aren't afraid to shake it up, to rein in the federal government. It's time for no more business as usual.
Sarah Palin holds strong values and commitment to our country and Constitution. Good news for Carolinians. A quality candidate is running for Congress in the 3rd District who shares those views, and he's now Palin-powered. Taylor Griffin, endorsed by Sarah Palin. He's here today to talk all about it. Sarah Palin endorses another candidate, and this is someone she's backed before. We'll tell you who she's behind in Maryland. Amazing America with Sarah Palin on the Sportsman Channel features racing pastors. A brand new Commonwealth Common Sense with Susan Stimson is coming up. And just ahead, our latest edition of Steel Resolve with Sarah Steelman. Welcome to our new network, Mama Grizzly Radio. The Palin Update is bigger and better than ever, and we will continue to bring you the latest news on Sarah Palin each and every week, and we'll also continue to have great guests each episode. So for those of you who have listened to us for years on the other network, please make sure you head to mamagrizzlyradio.com so you won't miss a thing, and follow us on Twitter at Mama Grizz Radio. Also like Mama Grizzly Radio on Facebook. Now let's say hello to a true conservative running for the House of Representatives in North Carolina in the 3rd District, and he has the backing of Sarah Palin. Taylor Griffin, so glad you could join us here today on the Palin Update on Mama Grizzly Radio. How are you?
Oh, I am doing very well. Thanks so much for having me.
You've been campaigning on the premise of shrinking the size of the federal government and eliminating our out-of-control debt. You know, every week, every day, Americans have to balance their checkbooks, make ends meet, pay bills. It's about time someone makes politicians in Washington meet those same standards.
Absolutely. And the thing is, all these things that we like about the federal government, or people say they like about the federal government, they will not continue. You cannot continue Social Security and Medicare and all of these other programs into the future unless we make the tough decisions now to get our budget under control in this country. And it's going to require tough decisions. It's going to require saying no to some of the free ice cream that we offer people from the federal government every day. And it's going to require people who are willing to do that and willing to stake their political career on it. And I am campaigning on that very notion. I'm campaigning on the idea that people understand more than politicians do about what needs to be done. And because people have to balance their checkbooks, as you said, so should the federal government.
So how do we stop the spending and move away from big government?
Well, I think the first thing that we have to do is we have to campaign on that, promise, and instead of campaigning on more promises from the federal government. And so I have frequently said to groups large and small when I speak that I'm probably the only person campaigning for Congress to be less important after I get in office than I am now, because I want to shrink the size of the federal government. I want local governments that are closer to the people they govern to hold more of the control and to have more of the resources to take care of their communities, not bureaucrats in Washington. Because bureaucrats in Washington, frankly, don't make very good decisions, 9 times out of 10.
The endorsement from Governor Sarah Palin, what a thrill it must be for you to have her on your side, especially since you talk about common sense policies, and she is really the leader out there when it comes to common sense solutions. Absolutely. As I've said, Governor Palin is the epitome of a principled conservative. I got to know Governor Palin and Todd working with them during the 2008 campaign in Alaska. And I saw what she did as governor in Alaska and how she governed in Alaska. And you notice that the media doesn't spend a lot of time attacking what she did as governor in Alaska because she was actually very good. She was a very good, common-sense, conservative governor focused on getting things done for the people of Alaska. And I think what she is trying to do now, as using the profile that she gained nationally, is to try to get people elected around the country that share those same values. So I am incredibly honored that she chose to endorse our campaign, and because we do share those same values. And I want to govern I want to help Eastern North Carolina as she did as governor of Alaska. You talk about something called Eastern North Carolina values. Sounds like a simple phrase, but I think there's real substance there. Tell everyone what you mean by Eastern North Carolina values.
Well, I think that it's important to understand that Eastern North Carolina, the area east of I-95, is a lot different than Western North Carolina. We're the same state, but this is an area that is more rural. This is an area that, like Alaska, is dependent on commercial fishing and dependent on coastal areas. And this is an area that is impacted incredibly severely by the federal government. Now, some in a good way, and that we have a lot of military installations here in Eastern North Carolina, and we welcome our active duty service personnel, and we welcome the government involvement there. But then on the coasts and with our fishermen and that kind of thing, the federal governments are preventing access to the beaches for tourists that are important to the local economy. They're keeping commercial fishermen from fishing. They're even keeping local communities from being able to spend their own money to shore up their beaches to avoid erosion that's about to allow homes and businesses to wash into the sea. So I feel very strongly that Eastern North Carolina needs principled conservative leadership that will stand up for it, because there are very few places in the country where the federal government has such an impact, and often detrimentally.
You are loud and proud when it comes to being pro-life. Some
Yes, sir.
establishment types try to play both sides. They shy away from the issue or kind of don't talk about it. You put it right at the top of your list of issues on your website, the right to life. I mean, without life, there really aren't any other issues.
That's exactly right. You really can't have the right to anything else if you don't have the right to life, right? I think that in this day and age, it's very easy for us to equivocate and forget about these fundamental values that make us who we are as Americans. And I think this is one of them. And we have to return those values to Washington, to our federal government. And the idea in government is not for it to sustain itself and for politicians to be able to keep themselves in power as long as they can. The idea with the federal government is to reflect the values of this country, the values that created this country, and to help make sure that our government doesn't stand in the way of the people of this country as they try to create jobs and to make better lives for themselves and their family.
You're a big Second Amendment supporter. There's never been such an attack on our gun rights in American modern history. Are you prepared to battle the gun grabbers in D.C.?
Well, I just got my NRA rating today, actually, and and as a candidate, I received the highest rating the NRA gives to candidates, an AQ rating, and we're really thrilled and honored by that. I think that fundamental to American liberty is the right to keep and bear arms. This wasn't even a debate among our founders. This was something that was painfully obvious to our founders, that if you were going to have a country that was free, the citizenry must be able to arm themselves, and we must be able to defend themselves, and we must be able to use firearms to feed our families and ourselves if we so choose. And so the idea that now we're going to start restricting those things is wrong. And there is no evidence, none, that there is any correlation between restrictions on firearms and reduction in gun violence. The federal government has done studies on this, and they have found that there is no correlation between the two. So restricting the rights to own and keep and bear arms is taking away a constitutional liberty that our founders deliberately intended us to have as Americans, that is essential and fundamental to what this country means, for no benefit.
Yeah, and in fact, quite the opposite. We've seen so many cities who have had these big gun bans or the strictest gun laws, and they have the most gun shootings and things of that nature.
Right.
So Chicago,
Washington, D.C. being an example of that, although the Supreme Court did overturn the Washington, D.C. gun ban. But
now, for your local voters, what's the story with the Bonner Bridge, and what lessons have you learned from that debacle?
Oh, that's an excellent question to ask. Thank you for asking that. Well, the Bonner Bridge is the only connection between the Outer Banks islands of Bodie Island and Hatteras Island to the mainland. And this is very important for this local community. It's very important for the thousands of people who live there and the thousands more of tourists who come there. Many years ago, it was determined that the bridge needed to 30 years. It was time to replace it, and the state government started trying to put in place a new bridge. Well, that was 20 years ago. And ever since then, the state government has been battling the federal government and environmentalists to try to replace this bridge. And it's gone on, this bridge is now 20 years past where it was supposed to be replaced, and it's become unsafe. It had to be closed last year because the bridge had become so unsafe. I mean, we're trying so hard to protect a bird or a turtle that we're endangering people's lives. And I think you can tell the story of everything that's wrong with the federal government right there. When we choose the radical environmentalist agenda over protecting the lives of people, we have gone terribly wrong.
You worked for Jesse Helms as a young man. That must have taught you a lot.
I hope it taught me. I hope I can in some way. And those shoes are huge, but I hope I can some way try to live up to them. What I learned from Senator Helms is that sticking to your principles and being effective for your constituents are not mutually exclusive ideas. Because no member of the United States Senate, I think even Democrats would agree with this, has ever been more principled. And in North Carolina, we have never had a more effective representative in Washington than Senator Helms. And so I think that a lot of politicians today say, oh, well, I can't stick to my principles because I can't be effective if I do that. That is just not true. You can do both, and that's exactly what I plan to do.
You know, I was talking to Thomas Schmitz, who runs American Grizzlies United, a friend of the program here, a pro-Palin group, and he's been saying we need a person like Helms, a Senator No, if you will, who will say no to things that are bad for America or against the Constitution, instead of supporting these ideas that they know aren't right, or arguably worse, just kicking the can down the road.
But more importantly than even that, than even saying the no, is creating the environment where you do have conservative ideals coming to the floor for votes that you can say yes to and pass. And Senator Helms did that all the time.
Yeah.
And sometimes you have to say no in order to say yes. Like Senator Helms, when I was there, was ardently concerned about the amount of money we were spending on the United Nations and wasting, and how corrupt the United Nations had become. And he, as using his power at the Senate Foreign Relations Committee, restricted the U.S. dues being paid to the United Nations until the United Nations would agree to reforms. So he said no in order to get the reforms that were needed. And actually, in that case, I think that all of those reforms have now been backtracked on, and I think we're going to have to do it all over again.
Let's direct people to your website.
TaylorGriffin.org.
Well, Taylor, thank you, sir. God bless you. We wish you the best, and good luck with everything. We hope to talk to you when you're in Washington.
Well, thank you so much, Kevin. I'm so grateful to you and for Governor Palin and Todd's endorsement.
For more on Taylor Griffin, go to TaylorGriffin.org. That's TaylorGriffin.org. Well, she supported his bid for Senate in 2012, and now Governor Palin is standing behind Dan Bongino once again. This time, the former Secret Service agent is running for Congress in Maryland. Palin says his boots-on-the-ground experience in Washington, D.C. has given him the wisdom and warrior spirit we need to stop the far-left liberal agenda that is fundamentally transforming America. A bonus for all of us is Dan's background and rigorous training as a U.S. Secret Service agent. He'll put to good use the positive characteristics that have been instilled in him with tenacity and dedication to principles. We need more like him. Amazing America this past week featured racing pastors. That's right, pastors behind the wheels of race cars. The show is really so much fun and unique every week, and Governor